A lot of us focus on how we are siloing our news and siloing our creative selves. Like I don't want to talk to anybody but my people. And that also happens spiritually, where you think you've got your path and you stay on your path and you don't look at anyone else's path, and you're doing yourself a disservice because you take a look around and go, oh, not only is this very similar and I feel much more connected to people I didn't think I'd feel connected to through this. And I even have it weirdly, and it's hard to say out loud, in the creative community, there's creative energy. And then when you feel the connection and it's really real, I've had a British accent. I could pull this off. Like Alan Moore talks about the magic of creative energy, and he sounds like a Hogwarts teacher. I sound like a Portland hippie who's lost his mind. But I do know that there's spiritual connections, and they can have a religious quality to them.
That was Brian Bendis discussing Choose Faith, a psalm for Doug and Wendy, inspired by Psalm 4. I'm Shep Rosenman. This is The Rest is Commentary, where we discuss what songs inspired by the Psalms inspire in my guests. My first guest today is Rabbi Michael Bendis, Peabody Award-winning comics creator, Amazon and New York Times bestseller. Brian created some of the great characters for Marvel, including Miles Morales, Jessica Jones, and Riri Williams. And he wrote and created many characters for DC, including Naomi McDuffie. That's, of course, in addition to creating a massive catalog of his own books, like Powers, Torso, Phenomena, and from November 2024, Masterpiece, and the recently released Fortune and Glory, the musical. You can find Brian's work at Dark Horse Comics, at jinxworld.com, on Substack, on the TED platform, all over social media, and more. Brian is one of my earliest clients, and over this long period of working together, not only has my hairline started to look like his, but we've become good friends, the kind who can have open, direct conversations about pretty much anything. Bendis and I were joined by Michael "Stick" Shefrin, who co-wrote today's song with me. A few months after Stick and I started working together at my law firm, I told him I thought he needed to become a rabbi. He laughed. His mom was a rabbi and he had lots of religious family, but he had never found his place in the Jewish community. A few years later, Stick began volunteering at Limud LA, where he found his Jewish community. Next thing I knew, he told me he was going to become a rabbi. He was ordained in 2016 at HUC. Today he serves as one of the rabbis at Temple Immanuel in Sarasota, Florida. And Rabbi Shefrin, or Harav Stick as I like to call him, turned me onto hip-hop and post-punk and hardcore, including Queens of the Stone Age and System of a Down, which influenced today's song. We discuss so much, but here are a few topics that come up in today's conversation. How is it that two people with different but deep religious backgrounds can approach their common religion as inspiration for creativity so differently? The difference between giving over your thoughts and giving over someone else's thoughts. Remembering the dead. Memories of Manischewitz wine and drinking other unexpected things. The difference between factual accuracy and emotional truth in telling a story, and so much more. Let's start by listening to Choose Faith.
drained and so ashamed. Stop causing your own pain. Seething, broken, alone in your bed. Make a plan. God will laugh. Expect the worst and sit with it. Even if it's for the best. Sometimes you need to get angry. Sometimes you say it out loud. Touch and take it. Sometimes you close your mouth and you shake. This time you choose faith. An act of conscience, get out of bed. Don't miss your golden chance. Now's the time to heal yourself instead. Make a plan. God will laugh. Expect the worst and sit with it. Make a plan. God will laugh. Expect the worst and sit with it. Even if it's for the best.
In the same way that I was inspired by the psalmist to start writing these songs, and that Michael and I were inspired by the psalmist to write this one, we're hoping that the song inspired something in you. Whether love or loathing, questions or commentary, hope or hatred, I don't really care. And that's how this conversation begins. I have no idea where you're going to take us.
Oh, good. I have a lot of questions. I did. I said to Lisa, I hope Shep's in the mood to be interviewed. I have a lot of questions. I listened to the song quite a few times and went through the material as well. And what was driving me to listen to, other than excellent musicianship and bravo, was how fascinated that your Judaism is inspiring creativity at the highest level. Like you're hyper focused on taking Judaica learning and applying it to your music and making something new out of it. And that I, raised similarly to you, don't. And that I often find myself like the Judaism is all over the work, good Lord. But I often have to reread it and go, oh, look, there's my Judaism. Oh, there's my rabbi. Peter Parker is Jewish, and I am not going to ever give that up. I find myself fascinated by how the focus of bringing the Judaism into the rock and roll and what inspired it.
It started in 2003, 2006, when my kids were bored one Passover at Camp Ramah. I said I would take my kids and their friends and write a song with them. And the kids wrote this adorable song. 15 steps in the Seder, 15 Dayenu. Sometime later, I went to this thing called Fearless Songwriting, run by my friend Timmy Reardon, where Timmy encourages you to write a song a day in under an hour or under 90 minutes. And the first time I did it, I was like, it's never freaking going to happen. I'm going to commit to writing 3 this week. And of course, I wrote 6. It opened my mind. to the idea that I just need to start the process of writing. And if I'm not happy with the result at the end of the hour or the 90 minutes, I could always go back to it a week, 3 months, 6 months, 10 years later. That led me to write one song for each of the 54 parshiot. The thinking behind that is important to this one. The 613th commandment is Ve'ata kisvu lachem es hashira hazos, and now write for yourselves this song. I started that project with this verse, this commandment in mind. It's towards the end of Deuteronomy. I was like, I'm never going to write a Torah on a Torah scroll. I can't handle the parchmentness and the ink, and I have terrible handwriting. So I said, how can I do that? Well, song is my thing and learning is my thing. Why don't I combine them and write my own Torah through writing song? And my focus very much was on what did the rabbis have to say? My thinking there was, the rabbis are a little bit closer to Torah than I am, and let me give over their thoughts. I don't need to kind of come up with my own novel interpretations. So I was very, very boundaried, and it was like a good thing for me because, I can go anywhere as a songwriter. So I will set a frame, and that frame allows me to accomplish, because otherwise I'll just say, I could do it this way or that way or the other way, and I'll just never get it done. Anyway, I finished that project. Then I needed a few years of a break, and it was the pandemic, and I needed to find a way. So both my parents died a long time ago. My mom in 2001, my dad in 2008. So every year, just like my father and my mother did when they were celebrating the yahrzeit of the anniversary date of the deaths of their parents and aunts and uncles and grandparents, they'd invite people in, and, Uncle Normie or Tukayer would lead the learning, and we'd have olives and pickles and Goldenberg's peanut chews and, sesame sum candies and thin mints and, some schnapps. And that's how I grew up. We honored our history and the people we loved by getting together and learning in their memories.
Do you remember what age you were when you found out Manischewitz is crap? I grew up with it and I didn't know.
We have congregants that swear it's delicious.
We had a guy in our temple in the 70s and 80s in Cleveland. I grew up in Cleveland. I went to the Hebrew Academy of Cleveland. And so at the temple, every Saturday, if there was a bat mitzvah or some kind of, after temple treat, there was one guy in the congregation who would pick up the bowl of gefilte fish and drink the juice in front of all of us. Many, many times. And we would scream like it's a horror movie. And to the point where many of us thought it was a Jewish tradition of some sort. And only years later, I'm still friends with all my friends from high school. Dude, one of my friends go, do you remember that? What was that? So now we know that was just, there was a crazy person in the room who was chugging gefilte fish juice. And now I know that no one else has experienced this but us. But for my whole life, I thought it was as like tefillin. It was just part of the
fabric of Jewish life.
Sorry, I have a very small group of people I can express this memory to. So thank you for being there for me. If that doesn't inspire a song out of you, Shep, I don't know what will.
I was trying to figure out how to celebrate their lives during the first year of the pandemic when we were not seeing anyone. So I presented some learning and I presented a song based on the learning. And that's how this project was born. And I used the same principles. It's kisvu lachem es hashir hazos. Write this for yourself. The difference between this project and the 54 Mosaics project is that on this one, because Tehillim, to me, the Psalms it's all about what's going on in the psalmist's heart. It's all about feeling. I decided that I wasn't going to be restricted by what the rabbis had to say. I would try to see what the song evoked in me. It doesn't mean that I don't learn. I mean, there are times I do, and there are times I don't. This is one where Michael, a.k.a. Stick, a.k.a. Rabbi Shefrin, and I spent a lot of time learning and really doing deep dives on the meanings of the texts. Some of it ends up in the song, and some of it is just about what we're feeling about what's in the Tehillim.
This is a subject I've been hyperly focused on the last few months. It was a conversation I picked up on one of my favorite podcasts that analyzed a story, and they were talking about what is the responsibility of a true story being told fictionally that is it more important to be factually true or emotionally true?
Right.
Right. And that like a movie like Seabiscuit, none of that happened. But that's emotionally, it's true, right? I think I lean in older age. I think I lean more towards emotional truth than factual truth, and I think that would have surprised younger me.
Well, okay, so I have a few questions. First of all, do you want to give a shout out to the podcast?
Yeah, no, it's a podcast I just did actually. Comedy Bang Bang Scott hasn't seen, and they just talk about like movies, and I brought to them the Warren Beatty movie Reds, which is about John Reed in the beginning of the first Communist Party. If you haven't seen it, it's structured around, they actually interview like Henry Miller and other writers and people who were there. And they're all very old. Some of them had passed away before the movie had come out. That's how old they are. What it did was it opened up the movie to, and now we're going to tell you the best story we can. There's no absolute truth here. There's just, everyone has an opinion of this, and here's a story. And how interesting that is versus Oliver Stone's JFK, or, you know, or something like Schindler's List, where yes, a lot of truth and some things are compressed for the reality of filmmaking. So when you're saying this about songwriting, it's the same. It's the same idea behind it. Is what's more important, the actual words the rabbi said, or the intention behind them, and what they mean.
Yeah. So this reminds me of so many midrashim and other learnings. In particular, it reminds me of that moment where Sarah talks to God and basically says, who am I? I'm not going to be able to have a kid. I'm too old. And God basically says, you're young enough. And like, there's this white lie there that, and I think it's God, maybe it's Abraham. I'm not sure who does it, but there's a white lie there. And I think the idea of a white lie as something that smooths things over serves a function. And the question is, when do you go too far, whether it's the white lie or the emotional truth over the factual truth? You must make you wrote Torso.
But I wrote Torso under what I now perceive as the Oliver Stone philosophy, which is, that was a story that actually took 9 years, but we wanted to be a thriller. So you tightened up the timeline a little bit, but all the things that happened, and there was 9 of them, but we made 5 because there's like 9 guys wearing hats. It's impossible to tell who's who, right? So you condense everything to get to the point, right? And that's what he did with JFK. And if you read like the book JFK and watch the movie, like obviously the movie is almost like a cliff notes of the much more complicated storylines that were going on there. So I thought that emboldened me to make my choices, as long as the actual truth of the facts were factual, and the actual, like, how people felt about it was factual. I look at it now and I'm like, like, like there's plus and minuses to both. Like it actually gets to the point, and it gets to the point I want it to get to. But I'm one of the 4 people in the last 20 years I've told this story. Maybe I should be more truthful, because, not to get Spider-Man on you, with great power comes great responsibility. And there's a responsibility there. If you're the one telling the story, then tell the story. So I'm of 2 minds of this. I don't have an answer other than you got to go with your gut at the time. But so when you said that, I was very interested in where you were headed with this.
Can I add one thing, Shep, that really struck me that you shared with me when I asked you that question, or you shared with me or whatever, months and months and months and months ago? There was also a piece of it that you felt like you wanted to leave this for your children. You shared that was really important, that this was like a chance for them to know some people that you love and respect and find inspiration in and connection to, and learning in Torah in like a way that you hope that, like, if they weren't, deeply immersed in textual study, this would be something that their father left them of depth. And that I found to be really just special.
My wife's father, who's passed, is a rabbi, and he left behind a lot of things like this, including recordings and things not rock infused, but things that were important to him, opera related things that were important to him. And it's been interesting to see Elisa's gradual relationship with that. I'll change. She put it away, like, and as slowly as our kids are getting older and things are like, and the spirits evolve, how she's looking at it as the gift that it is, which is, here's something for you.
Oh, for sure. Shari always tells me about studies show that the happiest people, the most content people, the most, people who lead the most meaningful lives are people who have strong connections with family members, with close friends, essentially advocating the position of community, family, and all sorts of stuff that, there are a lot of people out there who don't have that.
I have two, just so you know, Rabbi, two of my children are adopted, which I know kills the joke I said from before. As they get older,
feelings are more important sometimes than the facts.
There you go. The questions start to pile up. And then unlike with my oldest daughter, who's adopted, is from Ethiopia, and her door is closed as to what, she's going to have to, if she wants to find out, it's going to have to be a journey. Whereas my youngest daughter, who's adopted, we met the parents, even though they passed away, we have access to the grandfather, and there's a journey she can discover when it's age appropriate for her. And we, as Jews, with a lot of my wife's family is enormous. My wife is realizing, I have connections that I took for granted, because when you see someone who does not have them, they don't exist on any level, and what will take the place of them is of deep fascination to us. And part of us rediscovering her father's work and stuff is time to show the kids, even though this won't land with them as much as you want it to. It's not Star Wars. It's still a connection that it's there for them if they want it.
All we can do as parents and friends is open the door for someone, and it's going to be up to them to walk through it. We opened the door for both of our kids to be musicians. Maya she's a great singer, but she doesn't kind of pursue it. Eitan bitched and moaned throughout, his youth about playing drums and then bass, and then piano he didn't bitch and moan so much about, but the idea of practicing was torture to him. And look at him now. He wants to be a musician. Right. So he walked through the door even though we weren't expecting it.
That's like me not wanting to go to temple.
But I learned recently too, was another parent was talking about who's very successful. And they're like, oh, do you want your kids to follow in your footsteps? And they're like, no, but you know what I love? That I'm showing them that my work gives me connections to people. People feel warm about me. And they see that, and I want them to have whatever it is, just that, go for that. Yeah. Go for that warm connection with people through work. And I'd not heard it worded that way. And I was like, oh yeah, we're doing that. That I definitely want to have that be the lesson we teach them from all this nonsense, that we're dealing with.
Well, that makes perfect sense, especially in the work that you do. You are essentially running a community or a series of communities on every book you do. And you have to keep your co-writers, your co-creators, you have to keep your employees, you have to keep your printer, your publisher, your lawyer, sometimes your agent. You have to keep all these people in contact, connected, and happily so.
And the audience.
Yeah, not even that. Yeah, by the way, not even that part, Shep. I'm talking about a stranger says something nice to me. Let the kids see that.
You have an entire community that you want to keep happy so that you can keep this community whom the names of all the people who follow you, and your goal is to keep them happy, or at least connected enough to object to what you're saying. We can let go of the assholes, but that too, even creating disagreement, is building community. It's one of the things that I really I took away from the Limud movement. Limud has all these values about how you build community, and one of them takes a line from the Torah. They're all kind of aphorisms from the Torah, but it's learning how to have arguments for the sake of heaven. And for those who don't believe in God, you change the language so that it's an argument for the sake of something greater than yourself. Once you frame it that way, whether it's your family, your law firm, the team around your client, your congregants, you're asking a question of, well, what's the best result for this community?
It's so fascinating you say that, Shep. We haven't talked since I got back from Abu Dhabi, but part of the tour was that they took us to the very brand new built synagogue, mosque, and temple trio. So they had a day of unity, or I'm sorry, I'm saying the wrong word, but the Pope came, all the religious leaders of the region came, and they built, and I'll send you pictures. This is stunning. a very modern mosque. But when you go inside, even though it's made out of geometry, it looks like a cave. And then the temple looks like outside, it looks like a majestic building. Inside, an old school Jewish temple and a Christian church. And they're all in the same plaza. They're all facing each other, and it's a triangle. And they signed a proclamation that said, I have the Pope and everybody else here. Believe in whatever you want to believe in. It's all belief in the higher purpose. It's all belief in expressing each other's better self. We are no longer fighting over which God we're praying to. We're all praying to whatever God that speaks to you, and just let's get there together. And it was, and it was such, they couldn't wait to show it to me. Like, I can tell there's not a lot of Jews come by. So they couldn't wait to show it to me. And it was truly wonderful. One of those things like, why did we hear about this in America? This is a big event. They should show all like, that's not the narrative that is sent our way in America.
I want to jump in with three things. One is I'm going to sign off in about 2 minutes because it's late and I have this has been wonderful to be a part of, and just so happy you listened to our song. It's really cool.
It was really, really good.
The second thing was Omaha. There's a campus in Omaha that has a mosque, a church, and synagogue, a Reform synagogue on the same property that work together and bounce off each other. Omaha.
Amazing. Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Random, right? And the third thing was the conversation that we were talking about a moment ago about the community building took me back to, there's an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in Venice. I think it's like a men's meeting, and in their format, they have this great statement that I have like held so close to my heart for all these years. We owe you the truth as we see it. You owe us the right to be wrong.
Yes.
And it's like, it's so beautiful because it forces the acknowledgement that you can sit together with totally disparaging thoughts, disagreement, argument. But as long as you like respect that person is coming from a place of truth, and that it's okay for them to be wrong, like you can stick together and get through it all. And that meeting's been going strong for years. And it's literally a place where people just jump in and attack one another verbally.
Wow.
Like you're gonna do this, you're gonna get drunk, and you're gonna ruin your marriage.
We had a lesser version of it while we were on tour. This wonderful Muslim woman was taking us through the three temples, and in the conversation, it gets brought up that my wife's a rabbi's daughter. And ever since you heard that, the woman second guessed everything she was saying out loud to us. It was so funny. I have it on tape. She was like, this was the temple designed by, I want to say, stop taping me. It was just, it's a very funny bit. It's just having the rabbi's daughter, she completely fell apart on it.
That's so cool. What an experience.
It was unbelievable. And I know they've got issues over there and much needs to be worked on, but it was a really good experience. I'm really glad I got it.
Well, I'm so glad you had that. I want to connect your experience to what we say every day. Those who pray Jewishly 3 times a day, say 3 times a day, and on Shabbos 4, and on Yom Kippur 5, which is at the end of the Aleinu prayer. We say, L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to repair the world with the sovereignty of God, using the name Shaddai. V'chol b'nei basar yikru'u et shmecha, and all of humanity will call your name. And I forget who it was. Yitz Greenberg, Saul Berman, Yosef Kanefsky, Chaim Seidler-Feller, one of these rabbis said that is our national mission. And to some extent, we accomplished that by inspiring billions of other people to believe in God, whatever God is, including Muslims and Christians. On some level, okay, maybe we can rest on our laurels, but no, the prayer says go out there and continue repairing the world so that everyone understands that it's not just about them, not just about their community. It's about something greater than yourself. Some of us call that God. Some people call it nature. Some people call it community. Some people call it higher power. God knows what it is. My friend Terry calls it the great energy. We're all focused on this greater thing.
Yeah, and it's something I think, a lot of us focus on how we are siloing our news and siloing our creative selves. Like I don't want to talk to anybody but my people. And then also happens spiritually where you're you think you've got your path and you stay on your path and you don't look at anyone else's path, and you're doing yourself a disservice because you take a look around and go, oh, not only is this very similar and I feel much more connected to people I didn't think I'd feel connected to through this. And I even have it weirdly, and it's hard to say out loud, in the creative community, there's creative energy. And then when you feel the connection and it's really real, I've had a British accent. I could pull this off. Like Alan Moore talks about the magic of creative energy, and he sounds like a Hogwarts teacher. I sound like a Portland hippie who's lost his mind. But I do know that there's spiritual connections, and they can have a religious quality to them just by making stuff with people.
I always do a lot of co-writes. And one of the reasons I do co-writes is the base of the triangle for me is, the text and that which is greater than myself. Without the human component, there's something lacking. What am I trying to connect to? Just words? Just God? I want to connect to people too. So I try to do a lot of co-writes.
It's called the third heat, if you're looking for a name for it.
I've never heard that.
The thing is, I got a thing, you got a thing, and there's another thing we can only reach together.
It's amazing.
I cannot reach it without you. There are places I cannot go without Mike Oming, and he can't go without me, but we know it's there. And every time we get together, it's a third heat.
Amazing. Wow. I love that.
And you felt it. You felt it together. You two have it.
Friends, I'm going to wish you both blessings and goodness.
I'm sorry. I was enjoying this conversation so much.
It's been great. It's 1:45. I have a funeral in the morning, so.
Thank you for sharing this with me. I appreciate it.
Oh, and I hope you enjoyed the song and that it is clearly creating conversation. So it's doing its job.
Awesome.
Shep, I love you. Brian, congrats on all the good things in your life.
Right back at you. So I want to spend a minute on the third heat concept.
Mm-hmm.
In Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our forebears, I'm just trying to remember where. Okay, it says two things. There's the negative and the positive. The negative is two people who sit at a meal and don't discuss words of Torah. It's like zivchei mesim, sacrifices to the dead. In contrast, two people who do sit at a meal and talk Torah, hashchina shruya beinehem. God's divine feminine presence is partnering with them. And your description of the third heat very much evokes that concept for me, because in collaborating with people in these different ways, what I'm finding is there are some people, it just flows. And it's not just about me saying yes, because I do push back. And there are other people where it's like you have to pull it out layer by layer by layer. And it's still a good and worthy collaboration, but it's an entirely different experience.
Yes, 100%. There's two things there that I love. No, number one is you're not, when I was a younger creator, I saw it as being easygoing, like just don't be a dick, right? Just be. But now that I have a little more knowledge about collaboration in other worlds, I realize that I've lived by the tenets of improv almost my entire creative life, where it's yes and it's never no. It never, for people who don't know, in the improv tenets, if you're on stage with the other improvers and they're creating a scene and you say no, I'm the dentist, you've ruined the scene. Like, you've now broken the reality that everyone's trying to build around you, and you're being kind of anti-creative. You're being a bully. Whereas if you yes and, you're heightening, you're elevating every idea in front of you and not rejecting any of it. Because any idea that's brought to you, you must assume based on your own spirit that it came from somewhere and it means something. They said it out loud, they mean it, right? So your collaborator must mean it. So don't reject it. Say yes and add your thing to it, or yes, perfect, great, whatever it is. But that attitude can be very empowering. And once I learned I was doing it by my nature, it became almost a religion and almost like a spiritual, anytime I'm in any situation, parenting, anything, I will yes and it before I'll shut it down, because something more always comes out of it, as a better understanding of the person or the people or what we're trying to do comes out of it. And sometimes you can yes and something all the way around back to your original idea, right? But still, it was good that you did it, because now everyone knows we're here, right? And the other part that I think you've been talking about a little bit, I'll send you this book. It's a great book. John Cleese from Monty Python wrote a book during the pandemic called On Creativity. It's a very small book, very short book. And its basic premise is how hard it is for adults to be truly creative, because creative is a child's imagination. And that once you become an adult, no matter how fanciful your imagination and how much bold your vision is, you still have bills and responsibilities and adult ideas in your head. And you now know the reality of the situations clearer, and it makes it harder for you to be silly about them. And all the things that come with adulting that can really squash creativity, and that how we as adults who want to be creative in our life have to allow for the space to let creativity in, which is to let go of everything and to stop thinking about it and go ride your bike and go play your guitar and go think of things other than, like, I must be creative right now. Think creatively. It's just let it go and it will come to you, and just let it go. And that's what childhood is. You're just sitting there staring off into space until you go, hey, wait a minute. And then you think of something cool, right? And that's where so much great songwriting comes from youth. Like why so many of the great songwriters of our time did it in their early 20s. It's because they're there. They're right there. They're right at that. I'm an adult and I'm still thinking like a kid. And I can play like an adult and I'm thinking like a kid. And that's why so many of those first albums are the best ones of our favorite artists. But reading this book, it allowed me to remind myself that being creative is my job, and emptying my brain to do that is part of my job. And as we get older, it gets harder and harder to do. I have 4 children. It's, there's constant thought of adult things. Now daddy has to go build Legos until the juice starts flowing, So, and that's what you were just describing, And sometimes collaboration is the skip, it gets you there faster.
Yeah. And it opens up different neural pathways because we all think differently. It also forces a measure of accountability. It depends on your partner, but one of the things that I like to focus on with several of my co-writers is the idea of prosody and how the words get pronounced. And is it consistent across lines? And that's really freaking hard, even if we look at this one.
Yeah, let's talk about the song. I completely derailed this conversation.
No, on the contrary, it's not. There's really no agenda beyond the talking.
Yeah, because there's that one phrasing that it's actually a phrasing you hear in other songs. I make a plan, God will laugh. That is something you hear. And it's been in other songs, but it came from somewhere, and it came from here.
It's a classic Yiddishism, man tracht und Gott lacht. It's actually better in the Yiddish or German. Plan and laugh don't rhyme, tracht and lacht do. But it's something that, your grandmother would say to you, or, your parents as they got older and wiser. Going back to the prosody thing, make a plan. God will laugh. Expect the worst. That's different. Is different than, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes a major focus because people speak differently.
And enunciate differently.
Exactly. They emphasize different words. Speech is music, right? Ba, 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 ba. Right? That was the melody of the phrase. Speech is music. You can also say speech is music or speech is music, right? There's a million ways to do it, and everybody does it differently from themselves, let alone from each other.
Yeah. Also, you're in poet mode. You don't have to. There's no rules. You can do whatever you want. I always think of that little bit in School of Rock. This is such a funny reference, but he's teaching the kids how to make a song. And one of the lines is, I don't have any rhythm. I don't have any rhyme. And he goes, no, ain't got no rhythm. Ain't got no rhyme. And the guy goes, oh, that's bad English. He goes, it's great lyrics. You just get to it.
Right.
What's the cheer way to say it? That's a lyric.
Yeah, exactly. It's the punchier way, that which is more melodic, that which is singable. There's so many little elements that go into this. In a way, to me, it reminds me of what you do. Your little bubbles have to be punchy in a different way. And the artists similarly have to bring out the details that tell the story of the bubbles while still moving in their own story. and be consistent with the theme and the rules of construction while still making it very, very interesting for the reader because it's different panel to panel.
That's true. And also it's the relationship to the words is very different. Your words are part of the music. It's part of the flow of the art. And in comics, for people who know what we're talking about in graphic novels and comics, the word balloons are right there on the art, almost like Post-it notes, like someone's covering up art to say something. So if you're doing that, you better say something good because you just covered up the art with it. So it is part of my responsibility when I'm thinking about, and I can be quite wordy. So I really kind of think about, do we need all these words and are these the right words?
Yeah. I tend to be very wordy in my first passes. Here, let me show you this just so you can, for shits and giggles. One of the commentators we looked at was actually a scholar, I think a Berkeley scholar, Robert Alter. So we took his translation and grabbed language from it and grabbed what was interesting in the notes. This was like the first set of stuff we were interested in. How long will I be ashamed? How long will I pursue lies? Tremble as an act of conscience do not offend. Some of this made it in there, but it ultimately became, you used to sing what made you stop. Which
That's it.
is singable, which is simple and relatable. It sounds like something, you would hear in conversation. You might not hear, you said it was your sin, but that was because we're looking for the balance between tracking the Tehillim, which talks about, so tremble and sin no more, while at the same time trying to find lyrics that were inspired by it.
Well, you're also doing, and this goes to one of my other heroes, Jerry Seinfeld, who is like, cut. Like if the word doesn't belong, get rid of it. Get rid of it. It's ruining everything. and think of it that way. Like if it's a word that doesn't belong there, it's not just something that's hanging around. It's ruining the joke. Get rid of it. And I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what you've done here. You literally scraped away, and even now you may find yourself going, I could get rid of 3 or more of those words.
Every time I hear it, I'm like, is that really the best way? And the nice thing for me is both that I like to finish things. I'm a finisher, but in the same breath, I also recognize that I might finish it again.
Yeah, it was fun to finish it. Let me do it again. Oh yeah, that's exactly right. Now I the only damn thing I learned in art school was nothing's ever finished. It's just done. You're done. Do another one. And that stayed with me for decades. It never feels complete. It's just time to hand it in.
Yeah.
That's when you're done. So I like this a great deal. And I also admire the editing thought process that's going into it, because you are keeping the truth while at the same time acknowledging that the language has to feed the song, or you're not going to have anything.
Right. It touches on something I wanted to ask you earlier. Do you start with heart? Do you start with brain and then bring in the heart, or does it just all come together?
I see it all as brain, and there's the brain that's helping and the brain that's not. And I just want to get to 12-year-old Brian's in here trying to write a Spider-Man story. Could everyone else shut up so we can do it? Is where I often go to. And, but as I get older, the other side of it is I don't even mind when I'm struggling through something. I used to get very frustrated when I was creatively struggling through something. And now I get excited because it's always ended up like at the end of whatever I'm huffing and puffing about, I'm going to get to the good stuff. Or if I'm failing, if I'm just making garbage, right? And then like, well, I'm showing this to nobody. This is garbage. But it was necessary to get to the next thing, which was the best thing I've done in 2 years. And that has happened to me so often that when I find myself wallowing in my own garbage, I don't get upset anymore. I get really excited because, here comes the fun. And I try to tell that to my students, because if I did anything over again, it would not, don't freak out when it's not working.
Right.
Because I used to freak out. I was like, that's it. I'm done. I don't know. I'm a useless pile of shit, and then I was completely wrong. So that part I try to like give to any creative person who wants to hear it. It's not brain or heart. I just think it's the right brain,
right
side of the brain. Yeah.
Right. And look, obviously, I think your brain is going to end up being a reflection of your heart, whether from a values perspective or just the emotion you're putting into whatever you're creating.
Well, I also think I guess I don't use the word heart because to me it's all heart. Like all the good stuff is heart. Like all the stuff that matters. The only thing that people connect with me with, the only thing I hear back from people on is the stuff that's heart. And then also like the added weird week I had this week watching 1,000 artists put their best foot forward into Miles Morales. People I'll never meet, bringing their absolute truth. That where I tried to also bring the best truth I could bring, and they're all like doing the same thing and feeling that connection with people I'll never meet. It's just so fascinating.
Just for you need to explain. Like I know what you're talking about, but be specific.
12 years ago, I co-created Miles Morales and his family with the artist Sarah Pichelli for the book Ultimate Spider-Man. And I just this week, as we're recording this, the second Miles Morales motion picture has come out to the kind of fanfare that looks like I'm being pranked. It's over the top piece of beautiful artwork was made up the bones of our thing from 12 years ago. And I'm sitting here watching people connect with it and high five. And I'm deeply fascinated by all of the artists, some of which I now follow online, but I'll never meet who we now we share this. Through this character, we're going to bring as much truth as we possibly can bring to the world. And literally hundreds of people were involved in the production of this film. And then it comes out the best way possible. And I just have to sit and think about it. Like now I'm getting Talmudic about it. Now I'm like being philosophical about what these connections really are and what they really mean and I'm so grateful that the message is a positive one too. Like it is the message I wanted out there and it's gotten out there and that's just tremendous. It's a tremendous experience. It'd be way, as you know, Shep, way beyond what my goals were in business. And so I can only sit there and go, okay, well, let's power and responsibility this. Like what more can we do with it? What else can there be? And what is this weird creative connection that I'm having with a bunch of strangers?
I want to kind of create a contrast since we spend so much time in the world of Hollywood and all aspects of it.
Yes.
As a creator, you're someone who's very open. You yes and you acknowledge other creators who are part of creating something based on your work. I've seen that time and time and again. You're very generous with the people you're collaborating with. That's a style of leadership that reminds me of like in a corporate setting and a leadership setting, the author Jim Collins, who wrote a book called Good to Great, and he talks about level 5 leadership. It's leading from behind. Yet Hollywood is not known for that. How do people like you work in this environment?
Matt Fraction, another client of yours and mine, who's one of my best friends, we talk about this often. Like we walked into, let's take Hollywood off the table for a moment. Comic books, the comic industry was built by gangsters. And from Superman on has been not the healthiest place for creative people. Yet we couldn't get here fast enough. We couldn't get in the door fast enough to be part of it. And then when someone tries to mess around with us and we have to call you, we're always stunned. We're always like, why are they doing that? And then really the question is, why did we think it would be different for us than all of our heroes who screamed from the rafters? They will try to take your stuff. So I'm working on that. I honestly think that it was easier to compartmentalize bad Hollywood nonsense with the dream of what actually is being made, right? Like you're actually like making stories that connect people to their humanity. And that's what we're trying to do. And if I have to put up with that guy from Warner Brothers to do it, okay, right? Like, as you know, my kryptonite is that because I'm not going to go there with poorly behaved people, sometimes people mistake that for weakness or mistake that for my being a goofball. And it's not, I just won't go there with you. I just will not get into the dirt and fight with you. I just won't do it. That gets mistaken for weakness. You know, same thing. I desperately try not to raise my voice with my children, like desperately trying to keep an even tone where I can. And I made that clear. Don't mistake that for I'm not serious.
Right.
Honor my patience. Translate that in your head as I'm at my wit's end, right? And so both with parenting and creativity, it can be difficult. It's hard to like want to be that person all the time, and it's just not human nature. It isn't. And I surrounded myself with piranha sometimes, and then want to go, why are you trying to eat me? It could be a little ignorant of me and quite immature sometimes. And I get frustrated by it, as you do on my behalf. We have kids. I have responsibility for more than just my energy. I don't want to be known as someone who fought back the dirty fight. That, you know what I mean? You want to save the fight for the important things, not for,
Right.
But
all these things are a pair. Like they're all connected. You know, the yes andness, the choosing hope. I mean, look, the name of the song is Choose Faith, right? That's what you're saying. Choose faith. Have faith in your partners. Doesn't mean that your partners won't, in this case, it's about God, but or about how you interact with the world in a godly context.
Well, but the point of the song is, make a plan. You still got to make a plan. Like that doesn't yes, God will laugh. It may not work out, but that doesn't mean the plan wasn't valuable and it didn't have a purpose.
Well, and that's the most important line there, which Michael contributed, and sit with it. Make a plan, God will laugh is my mom. Expect the worst is Shari. And sit with it came from Michael. And the last line is, even if it's for the best, right? So if you know it's going to be for the best, you don't necessarily have to sit with it. But the point there is you're going to learn something from that discomfort. What I think people call it productive discomfort, because you don't know what's going to happen. And in this context, look, the name of the song is Choose Faith, a psalm for Doug and Wendy. You get the reference there?
That was on my question list.
So Doug and Wendy are the whiners from Saturday Night Live.
A reference I get. Diverticulitis.
Exactly. And that was something that Michael brought to the table because they complained about everything.
Oh, I'm so happy. I actually thought it was like in memory of someone close to you that things didn't work out the way they wanted to. All right. And so I'm so happy it's this.
Well, but they are great metaphors, emblems, stand-ins for so many people we know. I mean, we would go to lunch on Shabbos and people would just be complaining the whole time. And I understand the value of complaints, especially when they are complaints intended to create change or to come to a better understanding of your kid's school or whatever. But the level of complaint and the incessantness of it without true productive pathways beyond the Shabbos table complaint, it's frustrating. And by the way, that's not just true of Jews talking on Shabbos over lunch. It's true of being in a law firm and a partner complaining about someone who's at the firm, or one of the other lawyers, one of the assistants complaining about a partner. Now that I think about it, it's the same version of the conversation that we were having at the outset when you were talking about the synagogue, the church, and the temple all in the same place, truly having arguments for the sake of heaven. And people have lost the art of doing that, which is why, my diagnosis, though I'm not alone, why the country's in the state that it's in. Everyone's in their own silos. We have to listen to our news. Yep. And if you dare read news from the other side, people say, well, why? And well, there's a very simple reason. I read a multiplicity of news sources because I want to get informed. And if I consistently read these 3, 6, 10 editorials by the same people on the conservative side and on the liberal side, I will find the people whom I trust and then have a fuller picture of the nuance. Because it's not as simple as the liberals are right, the conservatives are wrong, the conservatives are right, the liberals are wrong. There's a tremendous amount of complexity.
Always has.
Exactly. But we had tolerance for complexity, and at the moment we don't.
Let me ask you the one other thing that listening to your music, like I wonder why we as a Jewish people and American Jewish people, why don't we have a Black Panther? Like, why don't we have an icon of Judaism that expresses a celebration of who we are? And when, and I think it's part of like, a part of it is like, I feel I was raised to like, don't make waves. Don't throw your Judaism in everyone's face. It won't go well. Right. Like that kind of upbringing, which was handed down to me. I don't remember even, but that was a big part of it. But I did say to my daughter, like, wouldn't it be great if like the Jews had a Black Panther? And she said, we do. It's Miss Maisel. And I thought that was hilarious. And I fell off my chair, but it made me wonder why, with so many Jewish voices and music and whatnot, like why there's a disconnect to our celebration of ourselves. With all of our varied and very colorful history, and almost biblical history. There's no Jewish version of Afrofuturism.
Mm-hmm.
There's no Jewish sci-fi of us being happy and celebratory and looking towards the stars, that kind of thing. And it interests me culturally. I don't have an answer. I just thought we're Jews, we're talking about our creativity. It's something that weighs heavy on me. I do feel I'm headed towards something creatively, but I don't know what it is. But this question, I'll ask out loud every Jew I know, because it's like someone's going to have a revelation that's going to get me somewhere, I think.
Well, I have a few different answers to contribute to the pot that will lead to a lot of, as you put it, garbage, and then ultimately create something great.
But I do know the Holocaust part, that with the Holocaust, there's generational trauma, and that generational trauma carries with it a heaviness that it doesn't allow celebration of self so much. I do know that part.
I'm going to argue that while that's part of it, it doesn't go far back enough in time, because if you look at the writings of Rav Kook, who was the first chief rabbi of Israel, he essentially, in the most respectful and pious way, he advocates lauding and appreciating and celebrating the body. And he's advocating specifically to get away from the traditional Jewish posture of learning. Not that you shouldn't learn, but the Jew shouldn't be hunched over necessarily in a book. The Jew should be hunched over, digging from the land and getting broad shoulders and tan and the whole bit. So that is a step towards superhero-like construction, because he is talking about the muscles and the strength and the power. Exactly. Yeah. So we were already before the Holocaust, because he's writing, I think, in the 10s and the 20s in the 20th century. Beyond that, here's the humor piece. There were attempts, including the Hebrew Hammer.
Love the Hebrew Hammer. I'm so mad at the Hebrew Hammer. I may have told you at the time, because I used to be Chag Sameach, motherfucker. I used to say that all the time, and now it's in that, and I never found a book for it. And now I can't do it.
Well, I think you can borrow that and bring it back to life.
I'll know I'm hacky. I can't do it. Anyway, go ahead.
But so, okay, then of course there's your friend Shaban.
My world is filled with Shabans.
He had his attempts at creating Jewish superheroes. There's the Golem, which goes back to at least the Maharal of Prague. And by the way, when I hear in Hollywood circles, how are we going to do a Jewish superhero movie? The answer first is always the Golem. And I think the Golem is already out there in the form of a whole slew of superhero characters, including the Hulk and the Thing, right? Yeah. These are golems.
By the way, the Golem was a character in Marvel Comics. There's Marvel team up Spider-Man and the Golem, and he would show up and MS would burn on his forehead. And yeah, I sent it to you. It was, I remember I was just randomly reading an issue of Marvel Team Up. I'm like, I'm looking at Hebrew that I can read from my Hebrew school. It was like the crossing of the streams that I never thought would come, and it did. And then it was a big day for me, because then I also realized everyone who makes these are Jewish. Right. Like it was a lot of Jews making my comics, and I was feeling that connection without realizing it. So I actually just talked about that in one of my newsletters.
And that, for me, connects to the next thing I was going to say, which is we're also seeing a growing population of Jewish superheroes, including female superheroes. By way of example, Naomi Alderman's The Power. One of the characters, I mean, my sister might argue about whether or not she's halachically Jewish, but she's Jewish. Her dad is Jewish. There's a wedding. It's clearly a Jewish wedding. There's a mezuzah. There's Hebrew on the walls. So she's growing up in a Jewish culture. Like, for me, she's Jewish. You want to be Jewish? Okay, be Jewish. Why you'd want to be Jewish, we can have the debate about that. But she's a version of a superhero.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Is that a good show, by the way?
I thought it was great. I mean, there were things about it I didn't like, but I'm a fan. Sherry thought the book was better.
And also, by the way, like Superman is a Jewish archetype, Captain America is a Jewish archetype, and it's always about like, Superman is the Moses story, obviously, and created by Jewish creators, and Captain America. There's always the nebbish that turns into the Uberman. Spider-Man has the same thing. It's not a celebration of self so much as a transformation into what they see as a hero.
Right.
Right. And it's interesting. I don't have an answer. I just putting it out there as where Jews talk about creativity and where our archetypes and icons should be coming from going forward. I don't know. We'll see.
Personally, I think that there is so much to work with in the Tanakh, the 5 books of Moses and the writings and the prophets. If you look at the story of Daniel, or if you look at the story of Job, bit of an anti-hero story, but what Job endures is heroic. It's tragic. It's painful. But I think that there's stuff in there that can be turned into other stories.
I'll take a look. That's interesting. Well, I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for like 10 minutes. So this is fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Brian and Harav Stick for joining me today. Thanks to Emil Stern and E. Rose for their help in producing this episode, and to Jessica Chana Swedler for her help on social media. You can find Choose Faith and all of the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify and Apple. In the next episode of The Rest is Commentary, I will be talking with my friend and mentor, singer, songwriter, coach, and all-around inspirational human, Shanna in a Dress. We're going to talk about the difference between writing from the head and writing from the heart, responding to someone letting you down, how to move out of sadness, music as a vehicle for connecting to the divine, the idea of manifesting things into happening, listening to your body and spending time in nature as both a secular and a Hasidic practice, Byron Katie and reality's kindness, October 7th being a limitation on the notion of reality's kindness, and so much more. Please join us.